it's Caroline here with another episode of Coral Talks. Hope you all are doing well from the very cold and windy and rainy weather and staying dry, staying warm. Now let's start off today with a pun. I have a pun. I went to a manta ray disco last night and it was raving. It was the best disco party I've ever been to. All right, let's move on to the national holidays of yesterday and of this weekend and today. National holidays. Yesterday, March 13th, was Pi Day. Shout out to all the math lovers, the mathematicians. Today is National Potato Chip Day. So it's a Friday. It's perfect for a movie night with some potato chips. And it's also National Learn About Butterflies Day. I just read something about monarch butterfly migrations the other day. I found it very interesting. So definitely go learn about butterflies. And it's also National Write Down Your Story Day. So maybe if you have time, write a little poem, a short made-up story, a real story, anything that involves writing. All right, let's move on to Saturday, which is the day this is going to be out. Saturday is Everything You Think Is Wrong Day. So, that's sad. There's a day where everything you think is wrong. And it's on a Saturday too? My goodness. Okay. So Saturday is also National Shoe the World Day. I have a fun fact for you. Over 1 billion people worldwide do not have access to shoes, and those people run the risk of disease and infections, which actually prevents them from going to school. One organization that raises awareness about accessing shoes and providing certain places like Central America or West Africa with shoes is called Global Shoe Ownership. And they produce billions of pairs of shoes annually and donate them to certain places that don't have access to shoes. All right, we're done for the national holidays of this week. Just wanted to mention something. Fun deed of the day. I heard on Instagram something fun that you could do is go grab a piece of paper or your drawing sketchbook and go outside, and on the day where there's like shadows, stand under a tree or a certain building, anything that has a shadow, put your notebook there and trace the shadows. That creates like a nice activity to do if you have some free time. Hi guys, it's me from the future. Before we get started into business, I just wanted to let you know that I was able to add pictures that go along with what I am describing and what I'm talking about. So if you ever am wondering or lost at what I'm talking about, feel free to click on the video where you see my face, and you should be able to see the pictures of what I am talking about. Let's move on to the featured species of today. Today I'm going to be featuring the hammerhead sharks. I have some facts about hammerheads. The shape of their head, which is known as the cephalofoil, helps the shark make quick, sharp turns. Kind of acts like a hydrodynamic wing if you think of airplanes. They also have larger nostrils compared to other sharks. This is an advantage because they are able to track down scents more easily, and they're able to catch prey easily. And finally, super cool and interesting fact is that their eyes have 360-degree vision. So if you imagine, or if you look at a hammer shark, their eyes are very far apart. They're on each side of the T shape. Now you might think that this creates blind spots, but instead this gives hammerheads a broader field of vision. So they can see all around them, almost no blind spots. This, of course, helps them with hunting and catching prey. One way that hammerhead sharks is by using electroreception. Electroreception is where they use and detect electric signals to hunt for prey or to locate prey. They have a special organ called the ampullae of Lorenzini that helps them use electroreception. They usually find their prey in sand areas, so this electroreception is really helpful because instead of looking and depending fully on your nostrils and your eyes you can sense signals from that other organisms put out to better find their food. Their preferred meal is actually the stingray, and they're known to pin down stingrays with their head when they catch and feed on them. Some other foods that hammerheads do like to hunt and eat are crustaceans, cephalopods like squid, octopus, eels, and other small fish. So hammerheads are pretty cool, right? Knowing some of their fun facts and what they eat, something that is important to bring light to is that hammerheads are actually vulnerable to overfishing. Not only do they have orcas as their predators to worry about, they are also in danger of overfishing because they are targeted for their fins. They are also targeted as a result of fishing bycatch, which means that if you refer back to my episodes and you learn about the different types of fishing and fishing nets that are used, it just means that the nets that fishermen use tend to accidentally capture these hammerheads and cause them to be injured or result in death. I forgot to mention this, but hammerhead sharks are usually found in the warmer, more mild, calmer waters around the Atlantic Ocean, the Eastern Atlantic Ocean. So a popular place that they're found might be the Galapagos Islands. All right, that is it for the special featured species of today. I hope you learned something new. So today we're going to talk about hydrothermal vents. In order to make this a little bit more interactive and not just listening to me, I'm going to ask you a series of true or false questions, and I'll give you a few seconds to think about it before I actually explain what's going on, because unfortunately there's no me asking a question, you responding. So let me give you a brief introduction on what hydrothermal vents are, what I just learned, and then I'll ask you a series of true or false questions, and we will delve into it more. So to give you a background on hydrothermal vents are kind of like volcanoes deep underwater. It is essentially like hot springs that are found along the mid-ocean ridges where seawater seeps into the Earth's crust, gets heated by the magma, and then erupts back into the ocean like a volcano, but loaded with the minerals that come from the Earth's crust and the magma. Now let's back up a little bit and explain the vocabulary. What are mid-ocean ridges? You can think of mid-ocean ridges as mountains in the ocean. These mountains are formed by two tectonic plates that move apart and allow magma to rise in between the two plates. When magma cools and hardens, the two plates join back together, kind of creating a mountain. Now, this is not just one mountain that just pops up out of nowhere underneath the ocean. It is usually where these ridges are found, there's like a chain of them. So there's multiple thousands of mountain-like ridges that are underneath the ocean that are found. Hydrothermal vents are found just right by the edges of these oceanic ridges. Mountains. The first hydrothermal vent was found in the Galapagos Islands. We are very spotlighting the Galapagos today. They were found by the Galapagos Rift using a deep-sea submersible called Alvin by a group of deep-sea scientists. Hydrothermal vents essentially is a whole nother ecosystem. It is an ecosystem that relies on this process called chemosynthesis. Instead of relying on sunlight as a source to produce energy, bacteria use chemicals and minerals that come from the magma in the vents to produce energy. These bacteria that are thriving and these minerals that are found in these hydrothermal vents provide homes, food, support, and mating areas for lots of life forms, surprisingly. Species like the giant tube worm, deep sea crabs, and heat resistant microbes all like to hang around hydrothermal vents. Okay, now that I have given a little brief introduction on what hydrothermal vents are, I'm going to start asking these true or false questions. So, number 1, true or false, the water from hydrothermal vents is hotter than boiling water. The answer is true. Some hydrothermal vents can actually release water that exceeds 400 degrees Fahrenheit, but it does not physically boil due to the extreme pressure of the sea because it's located very deep down the sea, so it doesn't actually boil. But it is hotter than boiling water. Okay, number 2, true or false? Hydrothermal vents are short-lived and can only live for a while and will disappear over time. The answer is true. Vents only live a couple of decades. Those oceanic ridges are there for a long time. Unless there's some major shift in the Earth's crust or the tectonic plates, those ridges will never move or change drastically. But the hydrothermal vents that are located around or in those ridges can only last a few decades. And don't you worry, new vents will form in other parts of the ridges. Speaking of how hydrothermal vents form, I talked a little bit about how ocean ridges form, which is the tectonic plates separating and magma rising, hardening, and creating that new mountain-like form. I wanted to touch on how hydrothermal vents are actually created. When ocean ridges form, the intense heat that comes from the magma rises up to the opening of the seafloor, and once it hits the water in the ocean, it allows materials from surrounding rocks, iron, sulfide, and metals to dissolve. As that heat allows the different minerals to dissolve, the tall volcano shape is formed. Essentially, the shape of the vent is formed by those dissolved minerals. As time goes on, you could say that a hydrothermal vent would get bigger because it's just a pile of these dissolved minerals. A way for this chimney-like volcano shape to continue growing is at the very top of the hydrothermal vent, there's what looks like a hole or like an opening for the volcano. And that is where the hot water shoots out and meets the cold ocean water. This action allows the minerals, the dissolved minerals, to be out and about in the ocean and allows it to settle in with the rest of the vent. All right, number 3, true or false? Divers and deep-sea scientists are able to physically go down and study these hydrothermal vents. The answer is false. So, as much as I'm sure many people, including me, would like to physically see a hydrothermal vent and see the life that goes on there, it is, number 1, too deep for us humans to actually go down there because the pressure would be too much. And number 2, it is dangerous because of the minerals and volcanic activity. So instead of using us as humans to go down a study, you might be wondering, well, how do scientists know so much about hydrothermal vents? And how do people continue studying it? The answer to that is deep sea submersibles, like I was talking about earlier, remotely operated vehicles, and laboratory stimulations. So, scientists, engineers create rovers and deep sea vehicles that can withstand the high amount of pressure, the heat, and the exposure to volcanic activity, and equips it with cameras, detections, sensors, and sampling tools. Once this machine and vehicle is developed, they send this vehicle down to where the thermal vents are located and take pictures, collect samples, collect small species back to the surface to study. In a way, if you think about it, it's kind of like the Mars rover, where they just send this rover to that location and have it explore it for the humans. Another way that some scientists use to study these hydrothermal vents is laboratory stimulations. Some scientists are able to create conditions and chemical, material, mineral conditions that replicate the conditions of those hydrothermal vents and use that to study extreme ways of survival and species adaptations. Alright, so we're done with the true or false section of hydrothermal vents. I mentioned that it is a big ecosystem and that there are animals who live and rely on these hydrothermal vents, so I thought I would talk about them more. So first, let's talk about the giant tube worm. The giant tube worm can grow over 8 feet long, and something special about them is that they don't rely on food for energy and survival, and they essentially latch onto these vents to live. They rely on a symbiotic relationship with the chemosynthetic bacteria that I was talking about earlier to gain its energy. These chemosynthetic bacteria actually live inside the giant tube worms, and you know how I was saying that the chemosynthetic bacteria use the chemicals and minerals that are ejected from the vents, like hydrogen sulfide, to produce energy? So, these bacteria that live inside these giant tube worms continually use those minerals that come from these vents and produce energy for these giant tube worms. So, the tube worms don't need to eat, digest anything. They basically have a employee in their bodies that are working for them to provide energy. To help you visualize the giant tube worm, they're usually red and orangish, reddish. They're very thick, and a reason why they have red and orange bodies is because that helps them absorb the materials like carbon dioxide, oxygen, and those chemosynthetic bacteria to survive. The redness of their skin is actually called the bright red plume, and it is very rich in blood vessels. As you may know, those blood vessels can help them absorb oxygen and carbon dioxide needed to live. All right, moving on to another species that is extremely interesting was the crab, the deep sea crab that I mentioned earlier. It has another name, it's called the Yeti crab. Something really special about the Yeti crab is that it has hairy claws, hairy white claws. Now, the crab does have a digestive system. It does eat, but it doesn't eat what you think it would eat. It also relies on the chemosynthetic bacteria. The hairiness on their claws actually is filled with the chemosynthetic bacteria, and it kind of works the same way as tube worms. The crab basically eats the chemosynthetic bacteria off of their hairy claws. If you think about it, the hairiness on the crab's claws actually attracts and cultivates the chemosynthetic bacteria, providing them like a nice, cozy little home to live in and to grow in abundance. and be all ready for the crab to eat. And that, of course, that bacteria provides the energy and the nutrients that the crab needs for survival. All right, that's all I got for you about hydrothermal vents. I hope you learned something new today, whether it was discovering what hydrothermal vents were or learning about some cool species that could be under there. And hopefully you had a good laugh out of my pun. I really loved it. I tried to do some sound effects on the true or false questions, but it didn't seem to work. So stay tuned for that to actually work next time. And like I said earlier, I have pictures for you to follow along, and I also have a new cover page that I hope you will enjoy. And that is it for this episode. Thank you all for listening. I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful night. I very much appreciate you guys for listening. I love you guys, and see you next time. Bye.